when you guys were.
I was leaving the whole time. It was on mute. So at the end of class, you can do it again so that we have it recorded so that your parents can see it. And it'll be so much better.
Just don't come in on her. Okay, Madison, go to my computer, hit escape in the upper left-hand corner, close hers, open yours. Oh, yeah. Whenever you're ready.
I want you all to think about a time when you saw someone with an injury, like a broken leg. Now, when we see someone with a broken leg, we want to lend a helping hand, help them out in however way they need it, show empathy and compassion towards them. But when you see someone just acting out in public, we walk away, we don't offer the same compassion or the same helping hand, instead we just judge them. Now, why is it when there's no physical condition that we see, we just judge people instead of offer a helping hand? A lot of studies have shown that children with childhood trauma usually act out in public situations and make really poor decisions because they don't understand what happened to them. Interestingly enough, the distance between mental and physical health isn't as far as we believe it to be. Documented for the first time around 1995, 7 out of the 10 causes of death were increased by over 20% in trauma. My name is Madison Holbrook, and today I will be telling you about trauma's effects on mental health and why it should matter to society and everyone. Now, the trauma I'm talking about isn't like failing a math test or losing a sports game. It's rather neglect or abuse at the hands of someone else or your parents. It's something that isn't just forgotten in a day or even a couple weeks. It's something that never truly leaves who you are, and it makes a massive imprint on your life and who you decide to be. The life trajectory that you had completely changes, and your behavior completely changes because there is just no understanding of what happened. You act differently than you did prior to what happened, and it just doesn't, you just don't understand, and your brain can't comprehend what happened. It usually results first in isolation. The person isolates themselves from their family, from their friends, from their environment because they don't know how to react. A lot of anger because they have anger towards their abuser but don't know how to show it, so they just have anger towards everyone. And usually pure judgment because their friends and their family doesn't understand what happened to them and can't be there to support them and just doesn't understand why they're so different all of a sudden. Usually children don't even understand that they've had a trauma because they were so young and their mind didn't understand what happened. It usually takes a couple of years, even when they're like late teens, to understand what really happened, to know the full detail. Now, of course, we all have to grow up eventually, and children with this abuse are not different. They usually take the mental scars, and it can manifest into such things as really bad physical illness and even death. In a study called the ACE study that was conducted by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente in 1995, it showed that trauma can affect such things like your immune system, your brain development, and even the way that your DNA is read and transcribed. It changes everything about the layout of who you are, not just mentally, but also physically. It also tripled the risk in heart disease, lung cancer, and even took off up to 20 years of people's life expectancy. Now, trauma isn't everything. It's very much looked at as a mental disorder, but if we really took a step back and looked at all the physical effects that it has on people, we would truly understand how serious it really is. My biggest takeaway is just stories. Everybody has their own story and their own stuff that happens at their house or at school or anywhere. And we never truly know it unless someone is so willing and nice to share it with us. And now that I've researched and learned and I know about all of these things and the events that happen to these children and how they have to cope with it, I just think it's so important to show compassion and kindness without hesitation to everyone because you never know what's happening. We owe it to ourselves and others to just be patient and caring and listening and just always give the benefit of the doubt because there's such a good reason not to. Trauma is not an easy thing to understand or cope with, especially if you were really young and didn't even understand what happened to you. Especially if you can't get out of the environment that you're in, it makes it even harder because you can't escape what happened. We all have a story that makes us who we are, and it's normally from our upbringing and from our childhood and from the people we're surrounded with. And if the people you're surrounded with cause a trauma in your life, it does not help you. So what I really ask all of you is the next time you are so quick to judge someone in public for acting out or being different, just pause and see if anything that I said today really made a difference.
Hit escape. And then go to mental health presentation. Yeah.
Okay, before I begin, I want everyone to stand up real quick. We're gonna do a simple exercise. Okay, so find some space. Everyone will do 10 jumping jacks. Ready, go. 1, 2, 6, 8. All right, you can sit down. This simple exercise increased your heart rate, level of endorphins, and level of other neurotransmitters, making your body more relaxed and focused. My name is Noah Hackert, and today I'll be informing you on the impact that exercise has on your mental health. So an example of before you understand how exercise affects your mental health, you have to understand how it affects the brain. And to show you this, I have the koala. So the koala has changed in many different ways over time, but the main two ways are its stomach and its brain. So the koala used to have a much simpler stomach and a bigger brain, but over time the stomach adapted and evolved so that it would get more nutrients from the koala's primary food source, eucalyptus leaves. Since it could get more nutrients from these eucalyptus leaves, the koala did not have to move as much to get food. This lack of exercise over time ultimately led to the shrinking of the koala's brain. So this just shows how important exercise is for your brain. And it can also be shown with cavemen. So prehistoric humans had much simpler brains than we have today. But the cavemen, they didn't have the resources we had to get food, so they would have to hunt. And this hunting included lots of exercise. So this exercise actually boosted our brain and made it into what it is today. So one of the main psychological benefits exercise gives you is the rise of hormones. So one of these hormones is called a growth factor. Growth factors are essential for the human body to survive and are very important for your brain. So growth factors are created in the vital organs, and when you exercise, more of them are created. They then travel to the brain and increase cell capacity connections. When they do this, they are improving the memory and learning capability of your brain. But the main way that exercise helps mental health is the increased level of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins have increased levels while you're exercising. Endorphins, they relieve stress and pain and make you happy. And endorphins are also released when you laugh. Dopamine plays a role in how you feel satisfaction and pleasure, and it's a big part in how the brain thinks and plans. And serotonin stabilizes the mood and boosts happiness. So studies have shown that people with mental health disorders that struggle with mental health problems have low levels of these three neurotransmitters. So if you're not having a great day or you just need a boost, get out and exercise, because these neurotransmitters will make you feel much better and reduce your stress and anxiety levels. So over the past 50 years, exercise has been proven to beneficially change your mental health. Simple exercises like walking, running, biking, and swimming can make you feel better and reduce stress. Many believe that exercise has to be done at extreme increments to get this benefit, but it doesn't. Just 15 to 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week will make you feel better and reduce anxiety and stress. And the correlation between the mind and body is best explained by the philosopher Plato. He said, in order for man to succeed in life, God provided him with two means, education and physical activity, not separately, one for the soul and the other for the body, but for the two together. With these two means, man can attain perfection. This quote really resembles how the body and the mind work together, and how if you take away exercise, you're really taking away your mental health and your mental well-being. So if you really want to make yourself feel better and and be happier, get out and exercise. Thank you.
Noah, is your next slide your works cited?
Oh, yes.
Nice punting when you realized you didn't have the clicker. This table is wobbling, and I'm sure your parents are like, "Can you fix that?" Is it still wobbling?
I mean, a tiny bit.
Every time I take my arms off the table, it's like a
I think all of them
Hello, I'm Tate Mitchell, and I'm going to be talking about how financial stress impacts your mental health. Last year, 66% of Americans, including children, experienced financial stress at some point. Another study shows that 72% of adults experienced financial stress just last month. I researched how, if at all, financial stress impacts your mental health, and I found that it indeed does, just at different levels for different people. Stress is not something that you can measure, which is why there is no yes or no answer to whether or not financial stress impacts your mental health. However, most studies and myself conclude that it indeed does. There are some studies that show that during increasingly hard periods of time, the financial stress rates are a lot higher. For example, we saw this in 2020 with COVID and in 2008 during the recession. The main reason that people stress financially is because that they fear that they won't be able to pay their bills on time. Both in 2020 and during 2008, we can relate both of those times to people fearing that they won't be able to pay their bills. The higher unemployment rates during both of these times can be one of the reasons why people would fear that they won't be able to pay their bills. Also, the stock market during both of these times was not doing well, as you can see in this chart and this chart, and the high unemployment rate in 2008. Preventing financial stress is something that everyone tries to do, but only a couple people actually figure it out, because it's not something that you can do in one day. It really takes a lifetime commitment. However, to get started, you can put a budget in place. By putting a budget in place, you will be able to cut out unnecessary expenses and be able to have some money to save for emergencies. By having this emergency savings, you will be prepared for anything that life throws at you, and therefore your stress levels could be a lot lower. However, there are some people that even with the strictest of budgets will still experience high levels of financial stress and will still not have enough money to save for emergency savings. I wish I had a solution to their problem. Unfortunately, I don't. Poverty is a very hard problem to figure out, and if you ever find yourself in a position like this, keep working hard and keep being responsible with your money. Hopefully, you can find yourself out of this situation. Since there are so few people that have the resources to figure out how to get out of their financial struggles, there are very few people that are in bad financial situations and then come out of them and achieve financial freedom. However, the few people that do are very inspiring to the rest of us. For example, Gardner, the author of The Pursuit of Happiness, was one of the people to do this. When his dream of selling portable bone machines did not work because none of the doctors bought them, he found himself not being able to pay his bills, and he took a risk because he had to support for himself and his child. He applied for an internship that did not guarantee him a job and took 3 months of his life. The risk paid off, and he ended up winning the job, and he was able to achieve financial freedom. To be like Gardner, all you have to do if you ever find yourself in a position like him before his internship is be able to be responsible with your money, understanding your financial stress and where it comes from, being able to ask for help with your financial stress and talking to other people to prevent a breakdown, and being responsible with your money. By doing all three of these things, you can become successful financially and prevent your financial stress. Thank you.
Well, that's no good. Do you want to turn that to face me?
What?
You want to turn that to face me, or you could?
No, I want this.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you crack that open already?
Actually, I'm not getting it.
Okay.
No, I'm not getting it. Whenever I'm ready.
Yeah, just remember that your slideshow is right behind you right now. There you go.
Sorry.
Perfect. Nope, that's okay. You're good.
All right. I want you all to imagine something for a second. You come home from school and no one is there to greet you or ask how your day was. You can't settle down because you are constantly being moved around from place to place, and all of your most precious possessions are being carried around in a garbage bag. There are 424,000 people in foster care that have to deal with all of these problems. And even though the foster care system has been around since 1865, there are still so many issues with it that cause children to be at a higher risk for mental health issues as well as behavioral problems. My name is Gabe Dirksen, and I'm going to be telling you about how foster care affects mental health. According to adoptuskids.org, the average age of a child in foster care is 8 years old. At this young age, children crave attention. However, in some foster homes, there could be up to 8 children living there that all need attention. Sadly, the first response from some young kids is to behave poorly or treat others with disrespect. According to child welfare expert Wendy Blown, children in foster care are at a significantly higher rate to develop behavioral problems because of the deeply rooted knowledge in their brain that when they want something, they have to behave poorly or be mean to others. One of the most significant factors in a child's mental health is their placement. They have to hope every time they go somewhere new that it's a safe home where they will not be abused or neglected. I recently read 3 Little Words. It tells the story of Ashley Rhodes Porter and her life through foster care. She once had to live in an abusive home where the punishments included beatings, force-feeding toddlers hot sauce, forcing them to do 20-minute wall squats, or if they failed, they would be beaten with a wooden spoon, and forcing them to stay outside all day in the Florida summer heat. This is something no child should have to go through and has long-term effects on mental health. According to Kansas City Star, as well as other child welfare experts, children in foster care who experience this kind of trauma have irregular cortisol levels. Cortisol is the hormone that controls stress, and by having irregular cortisol levels, it leaves people with an inability to handle stressful situations, and you also lose a lot of sleep. This has long-term effects on mental health as it puts you at risk for panic attacks, as well as you can't stay focused if you're not getting enough sleep. Okay, now I want you to raise your hand if you have a sibling. Basically, all of you have a sibling, and even though you guys are going to argue sometimes, you still love each other and have each other's back. Siblings in foster care who lose their parents, the only one they know for sure that they can trust is their siblings. So, sadly, now in today's foster care system, there's not enough space for a lot of siblings to be able to go together. So now the one person that you thought had your back in this is now gone from you. To further understand sibling relationships, I watched the movie Instant Family. I specifically paid attention to Lizzie's story. She's the oldest of 3 siblings, going through foster care, and just living her normal teenage life. She has a lot of mental strain because she's the only one that really understands the situation that she's in. She's the only one that knows I don't have a family and I'm just being moved around wherever they have space. She also has to deal with the normal stresses of being a teenager, as well as worrying whether her younger siblings are feeling safe and loved. All this puts mental strain on her, and she often has panic attacks. You can see how this severely affects mental health. This and many other factors leave children in foster care at a significantly higher risk of mental health disorders as well as behavioral problems. There's a lot we can do to improve the quality of life of these children. And my final message is to encourage you all to check out any of these really great charities that do so much just to give a child a backpack to take to school instead of a trash bag. Thank you so much for listening.
Did you tell? Me too.
Okay. Starbucks. It is so sweet, yummy, expensive, and sugary. Since we have one right here next to Arapahoe High School, many students go there, and some people are even daily drinkers. My personal favorite is the double chocolate chip cream frappuccino. I had to look it up, but it has 62 grams of sugar in it. That's a lot. That is more than the 25 grams sugar recommended a day for women. And for guys, it's 36. A lot of people could think that it's harmless or as addictive as cocaine, but hopefully throughout the speech given by Lene Lambert, you'll have a better understanding of the problem with sugar. I also decided to choose sugar as my topic because I love it and I most definitely eat too much of it. So I wanted to see what it's doing to my brain and body. With that in mind, there are many ways to sweeten foods, such as artificial sweeteners, refined sugars, and natural sugars. It's explained by That Sugar film narrator, Damon Gameau, is that there are glucose, sucrose, fructose, lactose, and there's a few others that are more complicated. But glucose is in breads and pastas, vegetables and fruits. Fructose is in fruits and vegetables. Sucrose is table sugar, and lactose is in dairy. Last but not least is high fructose corn syrup, which was made by humans and can be extremely detrimental to your health if you eat too much of it. Sugar is in the obvious foods like candy and desserts, but it's also hidden in foods that are savory, like prepackaged meals, sauces, breads, crackers, and condiments. It's also a lot in low-fat items to keep the taste up and can keep consumers buying those foods. If you eat too many of these unhealthy, high-sugar foods, it can give you diabetes or obesity or even mental illnesses. Something to think about is that 1 in 3 adults are obese. 43 obese kids in 2015 had a study, they participated in the study, where for 9 days they had restricted sugar. Then, from that, just those 9 days, their metabolic health increased a lot. The highs and lows from sugar can also cause anxiety because you have lower levels of ability to cope with stress. A popular study on mental health effects from a high sugar diet is White House study number 2. The participants in the study had to take a questionnaire, and in this questionnaire measured somatic and depressive symptoms. If they responded with 5 or more of these symptoms, they were classified as having a common mental disorder. And also, something that was surprising to me was there was poll data from Arapahoe students, and from 51 Arapahoe students, and 90.4% of them said that you should eat equal to or less than 7 teaspoons of sugar. 7 teaspoons of sugar a day. But 58.8% of people thought that they ate equal to or more than 7 teaspoons of sugar a day. Sugar is just so addictive that it's hard to get away from, and if you stop eating it, you'll crave it. To wrap things up, I'm going to define dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in your brain. It sends messages from neurons to neurons. In a TED talk, I learned that when you eat sugary foods, taste receptors on your tongue send a brain signal to your brainstem. From there, part of your cerebral cortex sets off dopamine as part of the reward system. As you digest the food, there are sensors in your gut that tell your brain if you are full and or to create insulin. Sugar sets off a burst of dopamine as a reward, and dopamine causes addiction because it makes you feel happy and good inside. Drugs have a high dopamine release, that is why they're so addictive. Sugar, unlike healthy foods, has a high dopamine release that never levels out or drops off. It just stays high, no matter how many times you eat it. Although sugar can be good for you, like a quick energy boost or to help your mood, as explained in the 5 Unexpected Benefits of Sugar article, refined sugar has no protein, minerals, or vitamins. So it usually adds calories to your diet that you don't need, or it replaces healthy foods that could have had those vitamins you need. Now that you understand the types of sugars, what foods they're in, and the White House study number 2 and how dopamine works in your brain, you can make a better decision for yourself on whether or not you need to reduce the sugar that you eat. In my sugar-obsessed opinion, and definitely unprofessional, I believe you can eat sugar in moderation as long as you have an otherwise healthy diet and good exercise. So next time you're at Starbucks, think before you drink.
Think before you drink. That can be applied to lots of things.
Oh, sure.
You okay?
Yeah.
Wait, pause. Okay, you need to relax. Take a deep breath. No, really. Like, take a deep breath. Everybody, take a deep breath. And look around the room. Like, make eye contact with these people, right? They all want you to do great. You're going to do great. Okay? I have a question for you. Do you think in 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 30 seconds, you're going to be interrupted by the bell?
Yeah,
Yes?
probably.
So do you want to wait until it's over?
I
Or do you want to just go?
can just go.
It's your call.
Okay.
Okay.
I want you to picture a sweet baby or a playful toddler. Now, when you think of them, you probably envision them surrounded by love. Unfortunately, for many children, this is not the reality. While it's horrifying to see an injured child, many people don't realize the multitude of long-term effects it continues to have. I am Lily Treats, and today I'm going to delve into the issue of child abuse, signs that should alert teachers, doctors, and other adults, the effects on the individual's health and how it will continue to affect them into adulthood, and what can be done to mitigate and prevent. In Colorado, Dr. Henry Kemp and his colleagues were the first to define child abuse in the 1962 paper called The Battered Child Syndrome. Since then, we have learned a lot about child abuse. The 1999 U.S. Department of Health and Services says that 9 out of 1,000 children are abused, and in Colorado, it is 8 out of 1,000, which comes out to be approximately 10,000 children abused per year. For most least common terms of maltreatment considered abuse, it is neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. Since 1962, we have been more commonly taught to recognize these patterns with head injuries, chest and abdominal injuries, fractures, and bruises or burns. Unfortunately, mental health is one of the most difficult forms of abuse to recognize. The signs for emotional abuse can include, but are not limited to, overpleasing, angry outbursts, and or becoming more reclusive since the abuse started. Now, the effects of abuse will reach far into someone's adulthood. Someone who was abused as a child is more likely to become an abuser because they will commonly think, I was abused. It worked for me. Age is also a correlating factor in this. Someone who is younger and starts a family, say 18, 19, or 20, is far more likely to abuse their children because of brain development, which does not finish until between the ages of 25 and 27. In 1985, Dr. Vincent Felitti noticed that in his obesity patients, many of them had a history of trauma. This led to the ACEs study, or the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. Researchers looked at 17,000 middle-class Americans who were 80% white, 74% who attended college, and an equal number of men and women. These researchers looked at 10 specific things: emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, mother treated violently, household substance abuse, household mental illness, parental separation or divorce, or an incarcerated household member. To determine someone's ACE score, 1 point was assigned to each category.
Someone with an ACE score of 4 or more was 2.5 times more likely for hepatitis or for COPD, 4.5 times more likely for depression, and 12 times more likely for suicidal behaviors. Now, someone who had an ACE score of 7 or more was also 3 times more likely for lung cancer and 3.5 times more likely for IHD, which is the #1 cause of death in the United States. Another study has noted that someone who was abused as a child has a 20-year less life expectancy span. Now, after discussing this devastating problem with you, I would like to talk to you about mitigating the effects and prevention for child abuse. Treatment will usually involve some form of therapy, such as play therapy, which in its simplest terms allows children to work through their emotions through their own language of play. Therapy is now a necessary step for children to take because we want to introduce them to normal behaviors, relationships, and ensure that later in life they will have better conflict management. Prevention is not going to be easy, and as a nation we'll have to continue to work towards it. However, we can start by changing social normals to support positive parenting, which can go anywhere from providing education to a legislative approach to reduce corporal punishment. We can also encourage quality care and education early in a child's life. This can include, we should have emphasis on a preschool that is going to have strong, positive family engagement so that they can bond as a family and the abuse is reduced. We will, as a nation, have to continue to work for all children to have encouraging adults, supportive environments, and positive life experiences. Thank you.
Click on this at the top, where it says rough draft. Yeah, click on that. There you go. You made me want to go there to Starbucks.
I want to go there more though. I just love that on that. It's so cool.
Wait, which one is it to go for?
The front arrow?
What?
The one that points that way?
For me?
Yes, for you.
Okay.
That's honestly me though.
Yeah?
Alright.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, where are you gonna start? Where are you gonna be?
What did you have for breakfast this morning? Are you aware of how that food is affecting your mental health? My life has been changed by food, and food can change your life too. My name is Henry Nicholas, and this is how food affects your mental health. The gut-mind relationship. The gut-mind relationship is very important, and it impacts all of your body. The gut is home to hundreds of nerves, which help to produce things like serotonin that help to keep your mood and your mental health in check. It's important that you take care of your gut and the microbiome that is inside of it so that you can be happy, the rest of your body can be happy as well. Anxiety. Anxiety is a very common mental issue, and it is very serious as well. Patients have been able to find refuge using foods to help or hinder anxiety issues. Some foods that you should try to eat if you're struggling with anxiety are foods that are high in fiber, cultured foods, foods that contain minerals like magnesium, potassium, and selenium, and many vitamins. Some foods that you should try to stay away from are fried, processed, and unhealthy foods, caffeine, alcohol, gluten, and artificial sweeteners. Depression. Depression is also very common, and it can be just as severe. It's important that you take note of how you feel, and sometimes it's important to change your diet so that you can feel better. Some foods that you should try to eat if you are struggling with depression are probiotics and prebiotics. Omega-3s and other fats help. Iron, magnesium, potassium, zinc, and selenium are also important minerals that you should be able to find in your food. Spices such as saffron and turmeric also help. Some foods you should try to avoid are sugar, baked goods, and fried foods. The reason why these foods negatively affect your mental health is because they're disrupting the microbiome inside of your gut. They're destroying little bacteria that help to alter your mood and keep your body in check. OCD and bipolar disorder. Understanding these mental health issues is crucial to understanding how we can treat them. They can have many correlations that link to anxiety and depression, so it is important to really hone in on exactly what these disorders are. Some foods that you can eat to help and fix are omega-3s, melatonin, tryptophan, chamomile, anti-inflammatory foods, magnesium, and zinc. And some foods you should try to avoid are caffeine, alcohol, sugar, and gluten. The diet's Western versus traditional. So the Western diet is the diet that we all know. The hamburgers, the hot dogs, the greasy foods, the French fries, all those processed yummy foods. But they might not be very good for your mental health. Might be worth taking some time to look into a more traditional approach, which is filled with many more vegetables and healthier fats like omega-3s instead of red meat. The Western diet has not been known to cause depression, but it has been known to worsen symptoms and really hinder the healing process. The traditional diet, on the other hand, has been known to help and supply the body with necessary means to heal the body and recover from mental health issues. So, in conclusion, food can change your life. It's changed mine, and just simple, small changes can make a world of difference for your mind and your body. Thank you.
Henry, is your next slide your works cited?
Yeah. Do you want me to change it?
There you go.
Just change your pose. I'm like, wait.
Walt Disney, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, Michael Jordan, and Steve Jobs. These are among some of the most powerful people in the world. When you hear their names, you think of success and wealth. However, one thing that all of these people have in common is that they have all failed at one point in time. Hi, my name is Shay Santos, and today I'll be talking about how the fear of failure affects your mental health. The fear of failure is all mental. It's when your mind looks into the past, looks for the things that you fear the most, creates this worst case scenario, and convinces you that these things will happen to you. People who have the fear of failure often experience fatigue, low energy, are more emotionally drained, are more dissatisfied with their lives, and have chronic worry and hopelessness. Not only is the fear of failure caused by this lack of confidence and self-doubt, but it also intensifies it. And all these negative side effects build up, and they cause you to question yourself and make you think things like, am I good enough? And ultimately, it causes a person's confidence to shrink, and it makes the person feel small. I found 3 main reasons why people suffer from the fear of failure. The first reason is because when you fail, you don't typically like the way that it feels. This feeling of defeat and humiliation, it doesn't go away initially, and it stays with you long after the experience in which you fail. And when you find yourself reliving and rethinking what happens in this experience, you actually end up re-traumatizing yourself. People who have the fear of failure often see themselves as the final picture and not as works in progress. So when they fail, they think that it's their destiny to fail, and they don't understand that failure is okay and there's still time to succeed even afterwards. The second reason that people have the fear of failure is because they're afraid to disappoint not only others, but also themselves. They're afraid that they won't meet the expectations that people have set for them, so instead they don't try. But later on, they might find themselves thinking, what would have happened if I did try, or how would things be different? And they might see their actions as cowardly. So people who have the fear of failure are always searching for this perfect solution, where they can try new things and grow as a person, but also guarantee that they won't fail. But this doesn't exist, so instead, when they don't find it, they purposefully lower their own standards. Neil Donald Walsh is an American author. He writes, "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone." And a lot of people who have the fear of failure think that success is just not failing, when in reality, success is becoming a better person and taking that next step towards your goal. But in order to do that, you have to get out of your comfort zone. The third reason that people suffer from the fear of failure is because they are always seeking validation from others. They don't trust themselves enough, so they let other people control their lives instead of taking it into their own hands. And everything they do is to gain approval from other people. When they don't gain this approval, they think that they're letting other people down. And when they let other people down, they also think that they're letting themselves down. People who have the fear of failure worry too much about pleasing others, when most of the time these people don't even care, because they're too worried about what might happen to them in their next big performance or their next big game. So what happens is we end up restricting ourselves just to please others, when in reality they could really care less. The fear of failure comes from many things internally, including self-doubt, self-hatred, and a lack of confidence. When people have the fear of failure, they often try to run from it or just ignore it. But since it comes from things internally, you can't actually do that. So sometimes we try to numb this feeling of fear, but you can't actually numb one emotion without numbing them all. So instead of trying to numb these emotions and just ignoring them altogether, we have to face them and act in spite of them, and bit by bit try to get over this fear of failure. Mary Pickford is a Canadian author. She writes, "This thing we call failure is not the falling down, but the staying down." Success comes from trial and error, so you can't actually be successful without experiencing failure. And a lot of people don't understand that fear and failure are both actually good things. Fear protects you from the things that you see as threats, and failure teaches you how to become a better person and what not to do for the next time. So when we try to ignore these things, we're actually restricting ourselves and we're not helping ourselves grow. So in order to truly be successful, we have to look at both fear and failure and use them to our advantage. Thank you.
Riley, are you ready to go again after Parker?
Alright, so before I get started here, I want to ask the audience a very important question, and that's how many of you have had music impact your life? However big or small, however consequential or inconsequential, simply had music affect your life in one way or another. Alright, so Albert Einstein, the world-renowned genius and scientist, once said, "I see my life in terms of music." So for me personally, music has had a huge effect on my life. I've been playing piano since the age of 3 for almost 12 years now. And while I mostly play just for the sake of creating music and sharing it with those in my life, I also play for another important reason, and that's the benefit of mental health. My name is Parker Wallaney, and I'm here to share the benefits of music and playing an instrument on one's mental health. So for several decades now, music has been increasingly studied, especially in the field of neuroscience. A recent study conducted by AARP found an 18% increase in those who took place in music-related classes who described their mental health as better when it came to learning new information compared to those who did not take place in any music-related class. Anita Collins, an award-winning educator, researcher, and writer, says that increased amounts of brain activity can come from music. The study showed that the brain showed higher levels of brain activity when stimulated with music compared to other activities, and playing an instrument shows even greater results. Collins suggests that the instruments also add the very complex task of hand-eye coordination for the brain, along with analyzing the music as well. According to Harvard University, the effects of music can be traced to levels in decreasing of depression and anxiety, and an increase in overall brain health. So the effects of music can be seen all throughout the world, but there are two specific examples here at Arapahoe High School that I wanted to share with you. These are Mr. Funk, the orchestra teacher, and Mrs. Shabin, the choir teacher. I interviewed both teachers recently, and they can confirm the major impacts that music has on mental health. According to the teachers, music can do everything from creating relationships to preserving and enriching them. And throughout times of struggle, music can consistently help with trauma and loss on the brain. However, the main story that I want to share with you about music today comes from my piano teacher, Miss Layla Viss, and her 26-year-old son, Carter Viss, a marine biologist living off the coast of Florida and an avid piano player as well. The story takes place in November of 2019, when Carter was struck by a fishing boat off the coast of Florida while scuba diving. Carter ended up losing his right arm and suffered numerous injuries to both his left arm and both legs. For the next several weeks, as Carter recovered, Miss Viss made several trips between her home here in Colorado to visit her son in the hospital in Florida. When she eventually returned to go back to her church and perform at a service, she says that as she played the organ, she simply could not feel any emotion due to her deepening trauma, even though others in the audience at the time were visibly moved to tears. Throughout the next several months as Carter recovered, Miss Viss and her family say that they went through the 5 stages of grief, which include denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. However, one thing that saved them throughout this time was their love for music. Music actually boosted their mental health during this time period, and according to them, decreased the time that it took for Carter to recover. Carter eventually made a recovery, and after Miss Viss says she feels like music was an intervention, a type of healing process that helped the family get through a very tough time. So Carter eventually recovered after a few months in the hospital and continues to work in marine biology to this day. Miss Viss says she's not surprised at these results, as Daniel J. Levitin, an author and psychologist, says that music stimulates more of the brain, in turn leading to better mental health. In November of 2020, nearly a year after the accident, Carter and Layla had realized that music had served as their safe sanctuary, a safe haven in times of struggle and loss. Ms. Viss says at the end of our discussion that music is an amazing source of healing and on the road to healing as well. While humans are sometimes bound by the specificness of language, nothing is more forceful, impactful, and powerful at expressing emotion than music. And when it comes to improving mental health, nothing is more efficient, powerful, and beautiful at improving it than music and playing an instrument. Albert Einstein, a German violinist, once said, "I live my daydreams in music. I get the most joy out of life through music. I live my life in terms of music." Thank you.
Round 2. It's okay, maybe I'll have a smoother transition with moving the laptop.
When we think of the year 2021, we think of the global pandemic and how the year has barely begun. But have we ever considered what we don't think about? We don't think that in the year 2021 alone, there have been 215 gun-related domestic violence cases. How 10 million people experience domestic violence every year. How 20,000 calls are received by the domestic violence hotline every day. And how 20% of the US women population has been raped. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence defines it as the willful intimidation, physical and sexual abuse as a pattern of power and control. Each domestic violence victim has mental, physical, and emotional needs just like you and me. So as much as we'd like to analyze these victims in charts and bar graphs, we must realize that they are people who have gone through an abundant amount of trauma and damage. My name is Riley Burge, and today I will be discussing how domestic violence affects one's mental health through mental illnesses, characteristics of abusers, and how societal input affects victims. First, I will start with mental illnesses. There are many different mental illnesses that a victim of domestic violence can experience, but the most common are depression, anxiety, PTSD, and sometimes symptoms can even escalate to suicidal thoughts and or actions. These illnesses usually develop during or after the time of the abusive relationship. No man or woman comes out of a domestic violence relationship without emotional trauma. But victims of domestic violence don't only experience that emotional trauma. They also experience the lasting effects of the physical violence they endured almost daily. And that physical violence not only leaves bruises, but it also leads to an increase in cancer, hypertension, and other cardiovascular diseases. Over 85% of abusers are men and happen in intimate, interdependent, long-term relationships, otherwise known as families. At the beginning stages of domestic violence, there are little to no signs of violence. This is where the first stage of domestic violence begins. This is where the abuser starts to charm and seduce the victim, and the victim starts to develop a bond with the abuser. The second stage of domestic violence is isolation. The abuser will isolate the victim from friends and family and support groups, and in this stage is often where the abuser introduces violence to see how the victim will react. Most people don't know that it's incredibly dangerous to leave a domestic violence relationship because the third and final stage of domestic violence is to kill the victim. Over 70% of domestic violence murders happen after the victim has ended the relationship. When people think of domestic violence victims, their minds automatically jump to women. But women are not the only victims. In the book, Survivors and Loved Ones Guide to Healing by Wings Foundation, it talks through gender stereotypes and how it leads to victims presenting their pain as something else. Quote, men who are victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, hate crimes, child abuse, and other forms of victimization often endure pain silently. Social norms that teach us men are not supposed to be victims. Gender stereotypes are directed towards men in this case. Society tells males that their abuse is worth less because if they can't control the emotions of their abuse, that makes them less of a man. And because of that label, men have a harder time coming out and admitting to their abuse. This is why statistically we see more cases of domestic violence that include women. But women are also categorized in victimization. They can be categorized as too emotional, and sometimes they can be categorized as liars. The leading cause for gender stereotypes is the fear of being classified as gay or lesbian. Finally, I would like to say that each domestic violence victim is different. And each domestic violence victim is different. And there are numerous ways domestic violence can affect one's mental health. However, through my research, I have learned the effects through mental illnesses, characteristics of abusers, and how societal input affects victims. Thank you.
Say goodbye to your moms. Thank you for joining us.
I